Hello and welcome to my TOK presentation. My name is Rizvi, and the real life situation I'll be talking about is Abraham Lincoln, who has a reputation as a great person. He was an abolitionist, he fought to free the slaves in the American Civil War, and he's almost regarded unanimously as this sort of progressive icon. And his motivations for abolition were moral, not just political. He wasn't in favor of slavery. However, in contrast to this great reputation that he has, President Lincoln also has some very racist quotes, uh, which of course go against his image as this progressive icon. Now I'm going to read these quotes now, and I quote, "I will say then that I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and black races. I will say in addition to this that there is a physical difference between the white and black races which will forever forbid the two races living together on terms of social and political equality." Of course, that quote is very racist, but it's not similar to finding dirt on a politician, for example, because this is very easy to find. And although most people might not know about this quote, you can see it in his 1858 speech, and it's sort of expected of someone who lived in the 17th century. And this quote and this contrast between Abraham Lincoln's reputation and his actual personality and beliefs and thoughts leads to this knowledge question. To what extent should the modern Western lens be used as an ethical standard? Now, in order to continue with the presentation, I need to clear up some terms, areas of knowledge, and ways of knowing. Now, first off, the modern Western lens, which I mentioned previously in this knowledge question. What do I mean by that? Of course, it's a very general term because the West is generally consists of many different countries in Europe, North America, and of course, there's no singular moral belief in these countries. However, generally speaking, Western countries in the modern world are generally believe in individualism, freedom, equality, are against racism, sexism, homophobia, so on, which of course goes against the previous Western standard, ethical standard, which I'll get into next. Now, what is an ethical standard? Well, an ethical standard is generally just guidelines in which promote values of any given time. For example, the ethical standard in the 17th century of America might have been racism, whereas now it's completely against that. Now, finally, presentism, which is another term which ties directly into this presentation. Now, presentism is the act of applying modern ethical standards to history, and is generally not well liked among the history community. The areas of knowledge that have been discussed and will be discussed in this presentation are history, of course, because we're looking at different perspectives and time periods and societal influences. For example, back to Abraham Lincoln, his historical ethical standard as opposed to ours, and human sciences because of how we sort of react to these different ethical standards and how our reputation of these past figures like Abraham Lincoln might change. And ways of knowing emotion, of course, because of our emotional reaction to this quote by Abraham Lincoln, and also our emotional connection to him in the past, and reason because of our reasoning by applying the context of the historical situation he was in and his upbringing, reasoned with his actual thoughts and beliefs, which of course we don't agree with, and memory because of our remembrance of Abraham Lincoln and how we previously had thought of him before and our reputation and image of him. Now, my first knowledge claim is that the same, or at least similar, standards of ethics should be applied to historical figures because they're just as capable, being the same species as us, of making decisions from a Western lens, a lens which we agree with, because they still have free will. And a real life example of this is a progressive leader, Hillary Clinton. And this is not a political statement, by the way, it's just an example which supports this knowledge claim. Now, Hillary Clinton, her views of gay marriage have changed over time because also societally, our ethical standard and our view on gay marriage in the West has changed over time. Previously, of course, we were against it, and now times are changing, and we're starting to become more for it. And Hillary Clinton has sort of followed that. while Senator Bernie Sanders has committed to the same ethical standards regardless of the societal beliefs at the time, thus proving that it's possible and people are capable of doing what is considered morally correct, regardless of what context they're in, what societal influences they have in the time period that they were brought up in. A counterclaim to this knowledge claim is that while it's of course possible for historical figures like Bernie Sanders to act and believe modern ideas, it can't be expected of them to hold the same exact beliefs as we do today. Instead, being judged on their contributions to society, of course, because we're making baby steps towards progress. We can't just expect every historical figure to make a huge leap towards where we are now. Also, this knowledge claim number one assumes that the Western perspective is the superior ethical standard, and then lacks the foresight that eventually our modern Western standard is eventually going to change into a new modern Western standard. Now, my second knowledge claim, which goes directly against the first knowledge claim, is that historical figures should not be judged in accordance to modern standards. Instead, they should be given value based on their contributions to society relative to their societal surroundings and ethical standards at the time. So we should contextualize where these people were brought up in the time period that they were brought up in, and sort of judge their actions, thoughts, and beliefs in accordance to how they were raised. But a counterclaim to this is that the logic of knowledge claim number two also suggests that people of importance who had an unfortunate upbringing, regardless of time period, can be justified in their actions, or at least their actions should be reduced in judgment according to the context of their upbringing, due to the societal surroundings and ethical standards that they were raised in. For example, say Hitler had a terrible childhood. That doesn't justify the actions that he did, of course. Now, in conclusion, the conclusions drawn from this presentation suggest that people, especially historical figures, should not be oversimplified and should be viewed from a larger lens, acknowledging their faults and also respecting the steps that they might have taken to better the world. For example, Abraham Lincoln, of course, freed the slaves, but also was racist. And he should be respected for the steps he took to the betterment of human society, while also his missteps in racism should also be acknowledged. Context is vital in order to fully understand a person's beliefs and actions, and it's important to remember that there's no correct interpretation of any historical figure. There's no set morals or beliefs shared by humans, and societally, of course, we're always going to be changing. In the future, perhaps, we could be looking at the modern Western standards as savage because maybe the consumption of meat becomes a taboo subject, and we start eating lab-grown meat, for example. So it is important to contextualize people and their actions and beliefs in accordance to any given time and the time that they were raised and brought up in. Alright, so now some discussion questions that directly relate with the presentation. To what extent is an individual's belief system formed by the societal standards that surround them? To what extent are historical figures protected from scrutiny of a modern lens due to shifting societal norms? And should modern progressive leaders in places considered immoral, sexist, or racist in accordance to the modern Western standard who do not fully share the Western lens be respected like Lincoln might have? And does the product of their time argument unfairly justify immoral acts? And can the same logic be used in a product of their upbringing argument for modern controversial figures? Also, using this logic, can acts like cannibalism, rape, incest, etc., in settings where they're encouraged to be excused because these were encouraged by the societal standards in these locations, regardless of the time period. Anyways, thank you for attending my presentation virtually. I hope you enjoyed, and I look forward to discussing these questions.